to Special Report.
Black holes are one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no one, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to the embattled broadcast from behind enemy lines in the once great state of New York. My name is Rob Yox. This is Full Spectrum Universe. And tonight's episode is just me beginning, but what I've been doing over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 months, 3 months, and this is not a finished product just yet, is I've been taking the galactical information that we've been getting from so many different people, and basically, you know, what I've looked at is the comparative context of this information to come to some kind of consensus and really look at where this galaxy started or where this universe started and what it means when we, you know, when we take a look at who are the players, what's truly happening, and where does it all begin is tonight's episode. We're going to do a preface to this later on, which is going to talk about the two entities that we're going to start with. But there are two entities, of course, the masculine and the feminine, which is why we talk about alignment and getting into the context of what that is. But our universe started much the same. So, you know, I love the chat too, and I'm going to be very back and forth with the chat. And you know, ancient astronaut theorists might say yes, they might say yes, but probably not. Mainstream doesn't like what we're talking about, and again, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth. So what I've done is I've taken the works of many different people, many different sources. So none of this that I'm saying tonight is relative to my own experiences or channelings. And when we finish the whole thing, we'll do a shout out to all the different places where we derive this information from. And I'm more of the guy who's the archivist, right? My job is to essentially find the information, make sure that it gets stored away for the later generations. So, you know, with that being said, I want to dive right into this subject. And one of the things that I looked at when looking at this information, it was like there's a timeline forming in my head, and it's over, I mean, millions upon millions of years. But when we look at a lot of the religious texts around the world, we see specific characters pop up, and we think to ourselves, well, some of these characters are truly, you know, they transcend time. They go through all these different texts, all these different types of tablets and scripture. And when I look at that information, and then I look at what I've pulled on the galactical front, I say to myself, you know, a lot of these, it's like a codex. This Earth type of scripture is a codex with specific characters that we see. And when we see these specific characters come up, when we see them in the scriptures, they're not the exact embodiment of maybe what that character is, or maybe they are. What I'm trying to say is that these specific characters are known in specific religions as somebody. But I think that these stories come from an older time, an ancient past in which we never truly see and we never truly, you know, go over. So I'm going to bring up some slides just for visual representation while we do this, because it's always nice to not just see the guy talking to you and telling you, hey, look, this is what I found. So first and foremost, I just want to say that this is the Galactical Origin. This is sort of the origin story, right? And I mean, we start way back. And when I look at this in the context of time, I'm talking about Earth years. And the reason why I use Earth years is because we all are relatively, you know, attuned to Earth years. So this story of our specific universe, our local universe, starts 13.75 billion years ago. Okay? And there are entities which we'll call Mother and Father. And Mother and Father are the creators of what is in this specific universe. Now, when we look at what Mother and Father are, we see electricity and magnetism are representations of Mother and Father. And when we look into how these were created, and I'm going to give you a quick little backstory on how these specific entities were created. There was this one giant, either super consciousness or source, as we'll call it. Source was having fun within itself, residing, creating scenarios, and having a good time, and making up characters as it went along, but it got bored. So what it did is it took electricity and it charged itself. It charged itself to a place where there was an explosion. It didn't realize that what it was doing was condensing the energy to be shot outward, which is a lot like the Big Bang. And if we look at what the Big Bang stands for, we can say, oh, this was the Big Bang. But I don't think so. I think that what happens is these two entities, Mother being closer to the epicenter of that explosion, where she is filled with light and energy and given more of that feeling or that maternal instincts and the signs of femininity that we see today. Father is more analytical. Father was shot out past where Mother was, and from that moment, there was this longing between them. Because they used to share the fragments of the same consciousness, now they are two separate entities, right? So what happens? They yearn to be connected again, or to find that connection between each other. So they search and they search and they search. What they don't realize is that when that unity consciousness or source exploded, it also fragmented in other places. And that fragmentation created a place called the void, where space and time is basically nothing. It's nothing. It sort of is like the Big Bang, but it's not. It's creating two places, where Mother and Father are thriving in and trying to find each other, and they're able to coalesce with their energies. And then there's the Great Void. The Great Void is filled with absolutely nothing, no stars or anything like that. So this is the context in which we're going to go forward from. Now we know our local universe is, of course, bodies of planets, hundreds and thousands of planets. We're going to get there and how some of this stuff was basically seeded. But I want to really concentrate on the characters right now, because the characters are the ones that are going to move this story along. So with that being said, our local universe was brought to manifestation by an expansion of Mother and Father's consciousness. When these two found each other, what had happened was they decided to essentially combine themselves in almost a lustful manner and expand upon themselves. So they created what we know as the planets, and they were around doing their thing and being creative. So we think to ourselves, years past now, getting past some of the the construction of things, and we get to the first race of beings that lived within this place. And essentially they are the essence of both Mother and Father. The first inhabitants were a highly evolved group of souls. From the next layer, that's what it's called in like the multiverse of things. They were from a different layer than Mother and Father if we're looking at the different dimensions and densities. They were called the Paa Tal. And I'm going to show you what the Paa Tal are represented as. The Paa Tal are almost as if light beings, So they are these souls that have inhabited this space. And when we look at what this is, we're going to see that later on, the seeding of these other planets in this creation come from the Paa Tal. And the Paa Tal have certain characters that you're used to hearing about. And when we talk about these characters, you're going to say, well, that sounds kind of crazy. So I'm going to use names for them. And one name you're going to know, and the other name I'm not going to tell you right away, because if I tell you right away, you're going to say, he's going to gospel now. So anyway, what we're doing is we're looking at the Paa Tal. The Paa Tal were this race that were residing in the sixth density. They were light beings who volunteered for the task of shepherding the development of life in this brand new region of space and time. And as you can see, that's what they look like. And for billions of years, they developed and nurtured the galaxies, systems, suns, planets, and they would care for the great garden that is this galaxy, ensuring that they had the proper mix of primal elements to evolve the direction of these that mother and father, the founders, wanted. They wanted to create specific type of beings, and we're going to get to what those beings are, and that they would give gravitational nudges here and there, if needed, to an orbit, to harmonizing, and suck some of the energy out of the overeager stars and establish transport systems, wormholes, things like that. They were basically the tailors of what this universe looked like and how this universe interacted with the different parts of it. So really, it was a really amazing moment for this inhabitants called the Paa Tal. So we get to the next part of the story, and this is, the first and easiest part of their job was the creation. The tough part was engineering a DNA molecule that was capable of spontaneous evolution and mutation that could still support 7D unity consciousness while in the 3D form. The whole plan for our local universe and the purpose was to create conditions such that the conscious life could survive and remain in connection to source while embodied at the third level of density, the one that we're familiar with here on Earth. So we are somewhat of the, embodiment of what this mother and father were trying to create. We are third density. Some of us reside in the second density, which is the flight or fight mechanism, which is the primal urges. Most of us reside in the third, slowly trying to get to the fourth. But I'm not saying that our capabilities are meant only for the seventh. But that was the plan when everything first went down. They wanted, they really wanted us to expand on who we were and the consciousness. And this is talking about our consciousness now. This isn't just our vessel or our body. We're talking about the consciousness and what this consciousness eventually will become. So back to the slides. And if you guys have any questions, every now and again, I'm going to stop for a second and check the chat. But when I was reading this, and a lot of this I was putting together at the time, I'm like, this is wild. Like, this is the first inhabitants of Earth. You would think that they would want to be derivative of building up their culture, but they were already sixth density. So they were already striving to be where the third density people would want to go. And they're trying to find a molecule that resides higher than themselves as well, which shows that they were up for expansion too. And it's truly wild to see how this works and what's truly going on. So the important information for us today is because of much of like the New Age movements and, what we see, and I'm going to shoot this up for you so you can see a little bit of how that creating that 7D molecule is. And if you zoom in and put this on full screen, you can see the different levels of consciousness, what they sort of, entail when you're looking through it. But really, this information is pertinent because it deals with us. And it's important because a lot of what the New Age tells us now is that the third density is a prison, right? And we're destined to escape from this prison called the 3D, right? When it's in fact more of a hospital or a care center. And it enables us to heal some of the traumas that the Great Mother went through while trying to interact with Father. There were moments where Father didn't know she even existed and she felt out of place, or like things weren't connecting for her in different ways and energies. So they call that the mother's wound. And the mother's wound is these traumas, I guess, that we all go through. Whenever there's anything in reality, we have a polarity. There's good, there's bad, there's evil, there's not evil. And I mean, some of this story goes into yin and yang, and yin and yang can be represented as mother and father as well. This is where we get the comparative mythology that we talk about this, and so we have these two entities and this race of beings that are now, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th density. What's the purpose? Like, what's the purpose of them trying to go out and see this universe? And, people think, oh, it's a densely, fleshy, individualistic existence of creation from the get-go. But truly, it's to explore the potential of consciousness and what we truly can achieve by looking at where we've come from and where we've been to sort of become more malleable to what's happening on a macro level from our micro level. And that's truly the intention of what we're doing here, is to make sure that we kind of gateway out to these other cultures that have achieved consciously, and I'm not maybe technologically and stuff like that too, but you know, essentially to manifest these realities, we have to understand who we are. And going through a lot of this stuff, we're understanding that a little bit better. And I see Omar says that mother's womb is a stargate. That very well is the case. And what happens is, for these third density fleshy vessels to become a part of this now conglomerate universe, they have to pass, the consciousness aspect has to pass through that stargate to sort of downgrade and kind of get us into this place where we are right now. And a lot of this stuff's going to come on down the line. So it's fascinating to read this. And when we look at a lot of ancient texts, right, and science itself, we see this big. We talked about the Big Bang already, but if we look at the Bible, it says, you know, Father said, "Let there be light," but they don't talk about Mother in that way. So it's leaving out half the story, right? And essentially, these light beings were the ones creating and giving life to the lesser dense beings. So he gave birth to that light, and that light is now giving birth to even more less dense sort of, you know, sort of entities. And that's where we come from, in a sense. Now, since there are the people on the side of light and giving more towards those that they're creating, there's an adversarial side to that as well, because of the polarity, because of the yin and yang aspect of everything that we do. There's a side that's more self-serving, and we see this today. We see this everywhere. There's struggles in, you know, the free will or the consciousness to take this path of be in service to others, start creating and help be one of those light beings that you can create for others down the road. Now, I'm not saying you're manifesting these beings to existence, but your manifestation is existing and creating futures and future timelines as we get through things. So you are, in a sense, creating like these Paa Tal did, just in a different format, right? So let's go over the essence of the other side, the adversarial side. And I'm going to tell you what they call this on this conglomeration, and what I saw was the most impactful sort of name for this adversarial character. And we're gonna get there into the next one. But actually, before we get there, I want to talk about something that I found as well. And we're going to go back to the slide here. And the light being, or the Paa Tal, that was creating this specific molecule, which was, it was really wild when we're looking at it. The conscious multiverse is a local, it's local universe that exists at a fifth density and up. So that's why we're calling it the multiverse. There's the third and fourth dimension, but once we hit the fifth dimension, it becomes multiple. It's a lot less constringent to time and space and things like that. So when we look at what we're talking about here, we see that there is this molecule that they're creating. There is a creator, specific creator of this molecule, and that is Yahweh. In these stories, we see correlation to what is known as Yahweh. But Yahweh isn't what we think he is. He's a scientist. Yahweh is that scientist that correlates this expanse molecule that'll go from 3D to 7D. So we see in religions on this planet that when they talk about Yahweh, some hold Yahweh in the highest esteem. And it would be relative to the fact that that would probably be the case if he was the one creating us in that light, right? And we see him as God creator in some instances. But he is a Paa Tal. Yahweh is a Paa Tal. So I know this is sort of the part where people are like, well, dude, now you're getting into biblical stuff. And we're going to get even further into biblical stuff because I believe that these ancient cultures on our planet were given this information of this historical context. And what they did is they perpetrated their nuanced religions and their perceptions was also what we talk about. This is how they were conveying this message to the people who were, following these different religions, and it's their contextual understanding of what they're hearing from entities that are beyond their understanding or comprehension. And they would look to those people as either God Almighty or gods. So it's pretty wild to think that, again, and Omar just said it, it's wild because we see that, yeah, like Marduk from the Anunnaki. Yes, it's the same exact thing. We see this in Ra. We see this in the pantheons that go across. These entities were not from this realm of existence, whether they came here or were here from a previous seeding. They didn't originate here, and they were looked at as gods. So if we go down the line with context, it's the same. It's the same application. And I'm trying to do this from a very logical standpoint, where I'm not interjecting maybe my specific ideas onto it. So I hope that you guys can understand that, because I do. This is it's a fine line we're talking about. So if we look at what Yahweh is not God. Yahweh is a scientist who worked on creating what humanity is. I'm sorry for breaking the bubble. Omar told me I better apologize for breaking the bubble. But I am. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to destroy anybody's faith. I'm saying if we look at it from the 40,000-foot view, we see a different story playing out. And when I talk about the adversary, I'm going to talk about it in the adversary, because if I talk about it in the context of which they explain it, you're going to be like, now we're totally getting biblical. But at the end of, promise me, at the end of all this, I will tell you, and trust me, this is not a one-off, ladies and gentlemen. This is just the beginning. All right, this actually isn't even the beginning. This is like chapter 2. Chapter 1 is the mother and father and how they were sort of created from unity. And unity is what we call the superconscious source, whatever it may be. And we can go back and preface that, but I want to show you what mother and father can do first, because it's talking about the alignment of masculine, feminine, yin and yang, the polarization of good and evil. It's all of that. And for any good story, we can talk about that. And Omar's talking about the archons. We're going to talk about the archons, but the archons are actually prefaced in a different way. They're called something different. We're going to go into it, and I'm going to tell you why they're called something different. This is from an Iranian culture or Iranian civilization that was wiped out. They wanted to wipe this Iranian culture out because it was talking too much truth, and it was giving too much of that galactical expanse type of knowledge, as opposed to, the set polytheistic, monotheistic, everything is this worldly. Everything is not this worldly. It's otherworldly. And that's the essence of what we're talking about here. So let's keep going. Basically, this happens primarily because DNA molecules used in the attempts weren't sufficient and designed to handle density consciousness, resulting in a total system shutdown and fragmentation of consciousness, paving the way for the Asuric forces to come and do their dirty work. Now, this is where we get to the void. Since we've talked about a little bit of the good side and how they see things, we have to talk about the bad side and the void. The void is a place where time and space doesn't work the same. There is nothing, and there are entities that reside in the void, because when mother and father had their first unity, some of this was given. It was given off, and it went to the void, because anything that comes off of mother and father that is not sentient in the sense that it has a purpose or a place, it resides in the void. It gets taken to the void. So basically, when that explosion happened, the fragments that came off become the Arahim and the Azores. The Arahim, now, I'm going to go to my notes that I have, because I have notes and slideshow. The Arahim, let's go down, are evil-spirited sort of entities. And in early Iranian religions, the Zoroastrianism or Zorvaniism, the Arahim is the lord of darkness, chaos, and the source of human confusion, disappointment, and strife. But it's actually galactical. Also known as Angra Mainyu, the evil spirit and the dark spirit, and it exists in opposition to Semta Mainyu, the good spirit or the bright side, also known as Ahura Mazda or the Armazad. And this is the Iranian culture, but there is also talk about this in ancient Native American cultures as well. So it becomes a little bit more, a little bit more expansive across the conscious plane, things like that. So let's go back to the slides. We've talked about Yahweh. Oh, one more thing. I wanted to talk about the Paa Tal again really quickly. So the Paa Tal is one of the original races. Now there are 4 original races. These races are all Paa Tal, but they're sections of Paa Tal. There's the Anuhura, the Memra, the Shinra, and the youngest, which is the Ashand. The Ashand, and the first 3 you may know as the Golden Ones, and we'll refer to them as the Golden Ones. And this is why, in a lot of stories passed down, we talk about the elves of Citron, or the elves that we see in these immortal beings that look like elves. These are what the Golden One represent. I don't have a slide for that yet. I told you it's still a work in progress. But this is why we talk about these elves in fantasy or fairy tale, because it came from somewhere else. And what happens is we look at these descriptions, and I say watching these ancient texts is like a codex, because we can go back when they mention these types of beings. We can go back and see what these beings actually did to interact on this planet, or in this reality, in this verse of the multiverse. And then we can use that in the context of which it's supposed to be when it goes from the micro to the macro, right? So the Arahim and the Arashah, or the Arasas, are of the void. They reside in the void. And I'm going to tell you, yes, elves, creatures of the Elohim. Exactly. But see, when we talk about the Elohim would reside within the Golden Ones. They are part of that Paa Tal. I do believe that. They are these enhanced beings. So they come later, maybe. Maybe an offspring of the Paa Tal. Very well could be. We're going to get into that a little bit later on down the line. And the terminology they use here is wild, because when we look at the adversary again, and I keep going back to the adversary, they talk about it in the biblical context, and it doesn't make sense that they would talk about it like that, but they have a different creation for it, which is really wild. It's really wild. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So basically what happens now, there is space in the void and the destruction forces that live within the void. So the Paa Tal had their work cut out for them, and they were determined to get it right. It took them 9.25 billion years to develop a universe that could support third density life forms. And that's sort of where we end with the Paa Tal in this moment. Now, at 4.5 billion years ago, the work and creating and implementing of a third density self-evolving multi-density interfacing DNA molecule began. It was in Ernst a Little. The chief engineer and designer of our form of DNA was a Paa Tal named Yahweh. Again, here we go. But before we really get into his story and the creation of the first humans, we have to talk about a different area, which is the adversary. When you first hear the name of adversary, we instantly think biblical references. But the being known as the adversary was around long before the Bible was. Long before the Bible was. So let's get to the adversary and show you what this adversary looks like. The adversary is a light being, or was a light being. And I'm going to tell you how this adversary came to be. And I should have capitalized the A. It's like I said, it's a work in progress. And I'm going to fix this all up, and we're going to present it as a real presentation. But I couldn't sit on this information. I had to come on and explain it because it was blowing my mind. And you know, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. So let's keep going. At this time, the story, this person enters the story, the adversary, and he's bright, powerful, headstrong, long before the infamous wars that we hear about later on, which resulted in the banishment to our Earth. At this time in our universe, there were many galaxies, solar systems, planets that were established. A big migration was taking place as beings from other regions of the multiverse came here to explore and create. Many also decided to take up residence as the souls of planets and suns in these new regions of space and time. The adversary was one of these explorers, and he had an idea about how he could create an embodied third density life form immediately. He saw no need to wait while the Paa Tal tinkered around trying to get the self-evolving DNA molecule right. To him, a DNA that is perfect and unchanging would be more ideal. Almost all of the adversary's later troubles resulted from the fixation on eternal, unchanging perfection, absorption of the self, which was the unfortunate byproduct of the manner in which he was created himself. They say he, okay? So basically, what this is talking about, we can say fallen angels, but this is before the Bible. This is no talk of God. So we talk of the adversary, we have to keep it in context. This isn't Christianity. This is well before that. So what they call him, I told you, I'm going to tell you when we finish this section. But this is the entity, and you know, Omar is on point here, right? While you're not right per se, you're super close, bro. Super close. Super close. So let's keep going. We're going to keep going down the rabbit hole a little bit. So basically, the adversary is very powerful and bright. He's the light bringer, the shining one, the morning star in various language. He was born with a chip on his shoulder with good reason. The mother and the father were still getting to know each other at this time of creation. It was at one point early in their courtship, mother complained that father's light was too bright for her. So bright, it was a bit frightening. Rather than figure out how to make his vibration more gentle or soft, father simply traveled to the dividing line that separates the void from creation and dumped that too bright aspect of himself into the void. This fragmentation of father created the adversary, who was immediately subjected to the influence of the void's residents, the Araham and the Azuris, who reinforced his already hurt feelings at being abandoned there. Mother and father both had fragmented aspects of themselves, both deliberately and unconsciously, into the void before this. And usually that piece of essence didn't have much, if any, conscious or consciousness, except for a set of imprinting that told it I shouldn't exist. But the early fragmented this time was very bright and conscious and had actually a lot of good qualities to it. That's how the adversary managed to escape the void and avoid becoming an Asura himself. By the time he found his way out, he was, as we have come to know him in the stories of the great wars that are to come, a bright, powerful, and persuasive adversary who was pissed at father, or at the one who created the mutating gene, I guess we could say, or mutating molecule. He would later become at that, but it's actually he's really mad at father as well, because of what father did and the abandonment that he felt when he was cast to the void. Understandable. And when we talk about this, I've kind of gave hint to it about the morning star. They represent this entity as Lucifer. Now, this isn't the devil. This isn't the fallen angel. This is the entity known as Lucifer, the bright one. Now, when I say that, people are going to say, oh, it's biblical. No, it's not. It's not. This is before the Bible. It's before Christianity. But it shows that within the residents of Christianity, they were telling a story from even before their time. And that's what I mean by these ancient texts become codex, because we look at these entities that they talk about. Now, whether they existed or not, or had different names, we can find reference to them because this information was handed to the ancestors of the ones that were created of that DNA molecule. Right? And let's see what else we got here. So this is the last slide that I have up for today. But this is what the Arahim look like from what they're described as. They look like almost like werewolves with horns, but a slight bit reptilian. We're going to go into what Lucifer or the adversary did with this contact into this universe, which is truly the last part of what we're going to talk about for this session. And we're going to do this again because there's so much more that we have to talk about. This is just the beginning. But I also want to take maybe questions and get some other chat and talk about a couple of different things before we do this. But he does look like an Anunnaki. Omar said he looks like an Anunnaki. He does. He does. The horned god. And this is why I truly think that a lot of what we hear, and even in the galactical sense, comes from a lot of what was actually happening. And we see these entities, and people can say, oh, they're, whatever, they're not real, blah, blah, blah. There's context to show that all of this was happening, and all of the religions on this planet capitulated to their thought to bring this work to light and to kind of explain what we're looking at now. So let's keep going. So the adversary knew of a race of reptilians living in a fallen region, an area fully under the sway of the Arahim, they're talking about the void, of an earlier layer of the multiverse, whom he could use as a seed stock in our universe, a race which he admired for their strength, size, aggressive nature, and androgyny, which he considers to be more perfect and efficient than a race that is split into sexes. Also, it was more in his image as a adversary or as a light being. He felt that he was more perfection and they were more perfection. There's a correlation there. So he felt that with the proper guidance and leadership, his leadership, this race could become truly powerful and dominant in this new territory that was created by Mother and Father. And it's not that the adversary was necessarily evil. At the time, you understand, he was just impatient, headstrong, eager, and wanted to create life in his own way and was deeply entrenched in this service to self paradigm, which is where we talk about him, and we talk about him as the adversary. Later on, he will show why he's the adversary. But in this stage of his evolution, he wasn't so much the adversary. He also had a chip on his shoulder when it came to divinity and its plans. So the fact that he was going against divinity, designated archetypes of the universe, the Paa Tal, didn't mean much to him. In fact, it probably encouraged him to do more and bring in this new DNA. So he took this reptilian DNA, which was quite stable and did not evolve or mutate spontaneously, and he seeded it onto a planet in this system that we now call Alpha Draconis. Thus were born the Sayakar, the first of the Draconians or the Draco race in our universe. Now that this is where we start to get to this universal conglomeration, right? So essentially, this adversary created the Alpha Draconis. And the Alpha Draconis then, and we're going to get into a little bit of the specifics of the Alpha Draconis and what they truly do. They are devious, they are primal, and he actually was able to do this quicker than they were able to create us or the entities that will now, seed the rest of the planets. So these reptilian beings got a bit of an edge. They were up on the technological side of things. But we're going to keep going a little bit. Now you're just going to have to look at my face because I don't have any more slides. So basically, these reptilians embodied life exists more naturally, and he was making them within the fifth density so he could impose a 3D matrix on the planet in which he developed and turned the 5 density being into a 3rd density life form, because they can incarnate into a DNA lineage that was turned towards the service to self. And because they believe their creator, the adversary, when he told them that this universe was theirs to inherit and dominate, the draconian consciousness actually vibrated now, because of that 3D matrix, at this 3rd density level, as well as just barely above the 2nd density, which is the pure fight or flight survival consciousness. So when we hear about these extraterrestrials out there that are hell-bent on creating chaos and war and take over everything, which we know that the draconian type of beings have created alliances and truly tried to manipulate everything to make sure. Thank you, Keith, for becoming a member. They want to be in control. They want to create empires. And when we get into the esoterics of this planet, we talk about reptilian bloodlines, right? So we see that these, even though we're all the way at the beginning of where this all came about, the trickle-down effect has consequences that are engaging us right now, which is why we always say a man or a woman who doesn't know where he comes from is a man or a woman lost. So we're figuring out, just like the art of war, know thy enemy, know thyself. And this is where this information comes solely into play. We have to understand how we came about, or how even the extraterrestrials around us came about, and also where the adversaries came from. So basically, the Draconians arrived much earlier on the scene than other races, so they achieved high level of technology before anyone else around them. And once they started exploring space, they essentially took it. They took their 3rd density matrix. Let me say it again. They took their 3rd density matrix experience with them wherever they went, because that was the frequency that their consciousness was most comfortable experiencing. Though it was not long before they figured out how to access the lower 4th density as well, the astral plane, through technology, and that the level of frequency where they tend to mostly hang out today. Yeah, I just scratched my face and I went around the microphone. But so by the time Yahweh and his friends got human life going, the Charakar had already achieved interstellar travel. They were a race of self-serving materialistic explorers, large and aggressive predators with no connection to the love or unity consciousness. They would also find that humanity eventually becomes malleable in the way that they want to see it. So this is where I'm sort of ending this first, not the conversation, but where I'm going to end my first, incarnation of this type of presentation. And I'm going to keep bringing this back until we go through. I've gone whole timelines up to where we are right now. So there is so much more information into this. I could probably do an 8, 9, 10-part series. And please hit the like button, subscribe, and also please share this out. I forgot to share it out before we went live tonight. But I was so excited about getting this information out because it's paramount, right? And we see so many similarities in these stories to right now. And again, it was fascinating to figure out that certain entities that we would find in these ancient scriptures on this planet embody what's in this story, which means that there's, it could mean a bunch of different things. But what it means to me is that these entities that came to the planet, and we know that we have 23 different races within our DNA. So 23 different races came to this planet with this information on the exceptional nature in which this universe was created. And they used their influence to input certain aspects of it into religious texts that go across the world. But only to the wanderer soul, or the one who's looking for answers, will they find all of this different information and all of these different characters. And this information I've been working on for months, but connections were being made. I was looking into different like aspects of it. I have a Word document that I have up that's, it talks about the Arahim a little bit more, and how the Azuras is a class of ancient Indian religious beings, and they're described as power-seeking clans related to more benevolent devas, also known as the Suras in Hinduism, and its Buddhist context that the word sometimes can be translated into Titan, demigod, or anti-god. And when we look at the fact that they say Titan, that takes us back to ancient Greece. And you see how you find these connections and how we put all of this together. It's truly remarkable, and it's all right there for us to find. We just got to look for it, right? So let me take a sip of my coffee because I've been talking forever. And I want to know what everybody thinks in the chat. What do you guys think of this information? Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? Was there something more that we should have? Leave a comment below this below this video as well. Let me know what you think, because this platform is a multi-interactional platform. We've started a club on Clubhouse where we can have conversations, like full-on 50 people on stage conversations, which is, I wish we were able to do that in this format too. Bring people in a few at a time, get them to, get people to talk and stuff like that. I really wish we could do that, but we've created a space over on Clubhouse, and I know Clubhouse is definitely, it's a little bit wishy-washy, whatever the case. It's a place where we can connect and create and cultivate this community. What we say all the time is we're the ones that we've been waiting for, right? We are those ones. So we have to be able to understand all these aspects of what we talk about in a more robust way. That's bringing in more perceptions, more people looking at the information and giving us their take on it, so we can get a more robust understanding on it. And I want to help create this community so we can become that archive. We'll be a living archive, as well as we'll put it to paper and put it into a hard drive. And that's one of the things that I've been doing. So we're about the 50-minute mark. I've been talking a lot, and I just want to thank everybody for coming by tonight. Look, keep in mind, we're going to be doing a part 2 of the creation. Will be a part 2. We're going to add more to the slides and kind of bring it more to fruition and go a little bit further in how the Draconians started to interact with the Paa Tal and what was going on after that. After that, there starts to become a little bit more of the modern extraterrestrials as we know them, and they start to have problems. They start to have fights. They start to really, go after each other, and it's some of it is dominance, some of it is like self-preservation. So we'll get into it, but I want to thank everybody for coming by tonight. Please share this out. Subscribe if you haven't. We are about 15 away from 15,000. Let's get it. But thank you all for coming by, and I'll see you all next time.